r/ask Reddit. Historians of Reddit. What is the biggest ducky moment in history? Stop sending people to kill me. We've already captured 5 of them. One of them with a bomb and another with a rifle. If you don't stop sending killers, I'll send a very fast working one to Moscow and I certainly won't have to send another. Tito to Joseph Stalin. If someone made a black comedy TV series about the Eastern Bloc, this would be one of the highlights. The Battle of Alicia. Julius Caesar's attacking some Gauls in modern day France, and they go hide in a castle on top of a hill. Caesar's army isn't big enough to take them all at once, and the Gauls have reinforcements coming, so a siege is impossible. So Caesar just builds a bigger castle around the one he's attacking. He literally just built 2 walls back to back and a ring around the castle. The first Gaul army was already too small to defeat Caesar, and his fortifications only gave him a greater advantage. The reinforcements were also unable to defeat Caesar's army now that he was behind several layers of spike pits and both earthen and wooden walls. Plus the Gauls inside had no way to communicate with the reinforcements outside, so they couldn't coordinate attacks. Both Gallic armies were defeated as they attacked Caesar's newly built fortifications, and Caesar emerged victorious. It's probably my favorite battle of all time. The Romans had to build over 20 miles of walls, right? And they did it really fast. Crazy fast. I still don't get how you can build such an enormous structure in such a short span of time. I guess he did have a little army building it, which helps. The construction and use of the war wolf. Supposedly the largest trebuchet ever built. When it was disassembled it would fill up 30 wagons. So anyways, King Edward I built this to siege a Scottish castle, but before it was even built the Scottish people tried to surrender, to which Edward responded with a prompt no. In actuality he responded with "You do not deserve any grace, but must surrender to my will." In other words, I built this trebuchet over 40 days and I am most definitely going to use it, and proceeded to use the trebuchet anyways. I went to all the trouble to build this dank trebuchet and now you bet your ass I'ma test it. You could have surrendered when I asked. You could have surrendered a week in, but after 40 days there's no take backsies. The Second Defenestration of Prague. The Holy Roman Emperor and King of Bohemia sends representatives to the Protestant city of Prague telling them to convert to Catholicism. The representatives get thrown out a window and allegedly landed in a pile of manure. So when France exiles Napoleon Bonaparte, the first time, they didn't think to change out military personnel. So he basically rolls up to the first French outpost he gets to, says sup and begins reassembling an army. By the time he gets to Paris, he's got enough forces that France is like, well, welcome back. He supposedly said to the first soldiers he encountered, "Any of you who dare oppose the emperor, fire." The soldiers cheered and joined him. Ferruccio Lamborghini was a rich man owning his company that built tractors. He talked to Ferrari about the imperfections of his car and how to improve them, and they basically laughed at a young tractor mechanic trying to tell them about sport cars. So he decided to start making luxury sport cars to compete with Ferrari, and thus, the rivalry was born. So I'd say the middle finger of this guy to Ferrari was pretty noticeable. When Ford was about to buy Ferrari and noticed something in the paperwork that said Ford would not own the Ferrari race team, they were upset about this, and Enzo basically said Ford was too low to own such a great team. Later on, Ford recruits Shelby Carroll and beats Ferrari at Le Mans and has every single time since they've entered a car. A pirate known as Jean Leffett had a bounty of $500 put on him by governor, so he put a $5,000 bounty on the governor. No you. This is more petty, but when Taft bragged to his friends via telegram about scaling a mountain on horseback, that it was a few thousand feet, clear weather, all in all not too difficult, his friend replied, "How is horse?" Taft was a chunky boy. More weight. Giles more ducking weight Corey. In the 1970s, the small town of Vulcan, West Virginia asked for state funding to replace a bridge into town. The state legislature refused to grant Vulcan the funding they needed. Instead, the town appealed to the Soviet Union for aid. After hearing about the request, the state legislature immediately granted over $1 million for the town to build a new bridge. If a small town in WV asking for Soviet funding in the middle of the Cold War isn't a big middle finger to the state government, then I don't know what is. The funny part is that 2 Soviet representatives at the US Embassy actually came over to look at the broken bridge and seriously considered funding the rebuilding to piss off the Americans. Imagine the propaganda the Soviets could have pushed from that. Napoleon invited his brother-in-law to speak with him before his coronation as emperor to remind the brother-in-law that he objected to Napoleon marrying Josephine because Napoleon would amount to nothing. Now this is the kind of petty duck I can get behind. Genghis Khan to Shah al-Din. After the Khwarezmids plundered one of Genghis Khan's caravans, killed his people, and took his shit, he thought to take the diplomatic approach and send 2 envoys and an interpreter. Shah al-Din decided to be a dumbass about it. He shaved the heads of the envoys to shame them and sent them back with the head of the interpreter. Mr. Khan was kinda pissed, so he marched 200,000 of his boys and ducking annihilated their town with only 1 stroke. 4 of that number are even able to fight back. He was so pissed at the Shah that he had the rivers keeping the surrounding villages alive fully diverted, so that he would literally wipe al-Din's birthplace off the map and make it so that it was like he never existed. No one would settle there or live there ever again. No one would be there to remember his enemy who had disrespected him. Not even the dogs or cats would be spared, said Genghis Khan. You can still go see the ruins of the once great cities of the Khwarezmid Empire. They are huge and the wind blasts sand through the bleached bones of a civilization that Genghis Khan reduced to a wasteland for having disrespected him one time. On the crowning of King Henry VII, he backdated his own reign to before the date of the Battle of Bosworth, meaning anyone who was loyal to him now but had shown any sign of opposition at Bosworth was now a traitor and an enemy to the realm. Justice served. French surrender in World War II. Hitler dictates that the French capitulation take place at Compiègne, a forest north of Paris. This is the same spot where 22 years earlier the Germans had signed the armistice ending World War I. Hitler intends to disgrace the French and avenge the German defeat. To further deepen the humiliation, he orders that the signing ceremony take place in the same railroad car that hosted the earlier surrender. The armistice is signed on the 22nd of June. Under its terms, 2/3 of France is to be occupied by the Germans. The French army is to be disbanded. In addition, France must bear the cost of the German invasion. I was hoping someone would post this. Hitler later destroyed the railroad carriage when things started going south for the Axis. Julius Caesar's death. At least he died surrounded by friends. Not the biggest, but definitely one to note. In 1966, Charles de Gaulle ordered all US troops out of France, as he said the country was leaving NATO. LBJ's first words were to his Secretary of State, Dean Rusk. Ask him about the cemeteries, Dean. When Dean Rusk mentioned whether or not the 60,000 plus US soldiers buried in France were to be removed, de Gaulle simply stood up and left the room, embarrassed. I absolutely love this one. Not the biggest, probably, but the first that came to mind. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe's response to the Nazi demand that Bastogne surrender. Nuts. Nuts. The general's word echo clear. Nuts. The Nazis shall hear. When Germanic tribes invaded Britain after the Romans left, they named the native Celts Welsc, meaning foreigner, even though they themselves were the foreigners. That later became the word Welsh, which the English promptly adopted for phrases like Welch on a bet. Too long didn't read. All of history has been one giant etymological middle finger to the Welsh. Yeah, but the Welsh language is itself a middle finger to English speakers. When Otto von Bismarck was about 50, he was walking down a street when a man ran up to him and shot him 5 times. Otto then turned around and began to beat the absolute shit out of him until some armed guards come to help him. When they inspected Otto for wounds, they found that all 5 hit, but they all either just grazed him or bounced off his ribs, literally the Iron Chancellor. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.